Just for a heads up, my story's probably different from any other story you've heard. I don't know if this has happened to anyone else or if it's just me, but I'll share it anyway. My cat's name is Star, and my family's had Star since I was 16 years old. When she was a kitten, she showed up on our front porch one day, and my sister decided to keep her. Even though Star originally belonged to my sister, she won everyone's hearts and became more of a family cat. I'm 22 now, and for the past few years that Star had lived with us, she had always been a loving, well-behaved cat. Didn't harm anyone, and sometimes to show how loved she was, she would rotate nights on our beds. But just a couple of months ago, Star began to act very differently. Or, I should really say, more like a possessed cat. Before the sudden change in Star's behavior happened, my mom had traveled with Star back to her hometown to attend the burial of her close friend, and she claimed that Star began to misbehave right after the burial. At first, when my mom told us that she suspected Star could have seen something at the burial ground since cats are believed to see spirits, my sister and I laughed it off and told her it was impossible. We just believed that Star was probably having a bad day or week, and that with time, she would be back to her normal self, but we were wrong. Star began to act aggressively towards everyone, including my sister, and if anyone tried to get close, she would scream so loud and scratch the person. Also, she stopped eating as much as she used to, refused to get close to anyone for days, literally destroyed any wall she had in sight with her nails, and the strangest part was, whenever it clocked 3 in the morning, Star would suddenly come out of her hiding spot and meow aggressively until morning. There was even a time when my mom had to use a long broom to kick Star out of the house because we couldn't bear her loud and aggressive purring. In case you're wondering if we took Star to the vet, yeah, we did. The vet guys had to come and take her in a cage, which had never happened before, and it was such a struggle before they could get her to relax. Sadly, the vet didn't find anything wrong with Star. Nothing was out of the ordinary, so we were forced to take her back home. I know this sounds unbelievable, but it seemed like Star got pissed that we took her to the vet because she became worse when she returned home. Because of how aggressive and uncomfortable she'd become, we were forced to leave her in a cage, and she went livid. After weeks of trying to get Star to calm down but to no avail, we were finally forced to listen to my mom's logic. The spiritual logic that didn't make any sense. Star's sudden change in behavior broke my sister so much because Star was her best friend and the only friend she had. My mom and I just couldn't watch my sister cry day and night because her cat was out of control, so we were forced to invite a spiritualist to come and take a look at Star. It felt like the only option left. As unbelievable as it sounds, the spiritualist who came affirmed that Star was truly possessed, and the reason she suddenly changed and acted that way was because she was trying to fight off whatever had possessed her. She mentioned something about cats being spiritual gateways, and other things I can't recall. Thankfully, she performed some spiritual rites and said some prayers.
Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
And like magic, Star returned to the cat she used to be. I'll be honest, if this hadn't happened to me, and anyone had told me that his or her cat got possessed, I would have just laughed and asked for the next joke. I've not always believed in the whole spirituality, ghosts, and unseen forces stuff, but my perception about those things has changed after what happened with Star. It took me a while to fully trust Star again. Those scratches can make you go crazy. It's been 3 months now, and Star is back to being the star girl of our home. She's doing great, but since then, she's been banned from attending burials before something else tries to hijack her body. No kidding. This happened to me 2 years ago, and since I've seen that I'm not the only one who's had weird supernatural experiences, I wanted to share my story. 2 years ago, my mother passed away, and her death broke me into 1,000 pieces. When I was 3, my father left us, so my mom was the only parent I had in my life. She was my best friend and my world, a hard worker who sacrificed so much to give me the life I had. So you can imagine how devastating it was for me when she died. After my mom died, living in our house became a nightmare for me, and for weeks I couldn't sleep or do anything productive for myself. It was as if my whole world crashed, and I was gradually sinking into depression. It wasn't until one of my friends suggested that I adopt a cat so it would keep me company and help me get through the horrible stage of my life. Before my mom died, she'd always wanted a cat, but I don't know why she never got one. So after a lot of persuasion from my friend, I finally adopted a pretty black cat. To find solace in that cat, I named her after my mom, Maggie. I'll admit that it was a bit difficult to adjust to living with Maggie for the first few days, because I kept pushing her away. But seeing how the poor cat just kept coming back to me and showering me with love broke my heart completely. Slowly, we became good friends, and living together became much easier. There's no doubt that Maggie helped me with my depression and gave me a reason to keep living, but that's not the reason I'm sharing this story. It happened that, weeks after Maggie and I became friends, I began to notice some strange behavior in her. Not strange in a bad way, but in a good way. After my mom passed away, I couldn't bring myself to give out or throw out her stuff. I barely even touched it because I believed they deserved to remain in her house. Also, seeing those things in the house always made me feel like my mom was still in the house. So there's this rocking chair my mom had, and I never sat on it after her demise because of how emotional it made me feel. For some strange reason, that rocking chair became Maggie's favorite sleeping spot. This was just the same way my mom used to fall asleep on her rocking chair while knitting. Now, if this were the only rocking chair in the room, I would have simply shrugged it off that Maggie loved the rocking feeling of the chair, but it wasn't the only one. My rocking chair was also in the same room, and each time I tried to force Maggie to sit on it, she would jump off the next minute and go over to my mom's rocking chair. Another strange thing was that Maggie loved to always wrap herself up in my late mom's favorite knitted blanket. I love to state that my late mom had a lot of handmade blankets, but she had a favorite one. It was a sky blue blanket with designs of red flowers on it. But of all the blankets in the house, Maggie always preferred to sleep on or wrap herself on my late mom's favorite blanket. Believe me, there was a time I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but in the long run, I realized what was truly happening. That's not all. There are a couple of other things I noticed over the years that truly convinced me that somehow Maggie had found a way to connect with my late mom's spirit. And seeing this brought me so much joy and peace. To be sure I wasn't going crazy or making things up in my head, I spoke to the same friend who persuaded me to adopt Maggie, and when I told him all the things I had seen, he said the exact same thing. It's funny how Maggie never got to meet my mom in person, but behaved just the way my late mom used to behave. Many people find solace in different forms, and mine happened to be a cat. I'm just glad I adopted Maggie even when it didn't seem like the appropriate thing to do. Maybe if I hadn't, I wouldn't have been convinced that my late mom's spirit still lives on, and she's always watching over me.